The night shift at the Deep Space Listening Station was usually silent. Most nights, the only sound was the soft humming of machines and the occasional tapping of keys when someone adjusted a frequency. It wasn't a place where people expected excitement. The team worked quietly, checking readings, sipping tea, and watching the blinking lights on the consoles. Nothing dramatic ever happened there. But on that night, something strange broke the stillness. One of the junior analysts noticed a small spike on a graph. At first, he thought it was a glitch. These machines sometimes picked up interference from satellites or storms. But this spike didn't vanish. It grew stronger, then repeated itself in a perfect rhythm. He leaned closer, confused, and replayed the recording. The same beat repeated. It was too clean to be random. He called one of the senior operators over. The senior operator frowned as he adjusted the screen. He knew the usual patterns: distant stars, radio noise, leftover signals bouncing off debris. But this felt intentional. It was like someone tapping on a table, trying to get attention from across a very large room. They ran the signal through a filter, then another. After the third filter, everyone in the room went silent. A clear pattern appeared: 3 short pulses, 1 long, 2 short. They exchanged uneasy looks. It wasn't any known code on Earth. It wasn't from any aircraft or satellite. It wasn't a human emergency signal. It wasn't even close. More pulses followed, building into something that could only be described as a message. The room filled with a strange tension. It didn't feel like a discovery. It felt like the moment before a truth you weren't prepared for. The analysts recorded everything and sent it straight to the international network. Within an hour, scientists from different countries were awake, reviewing the strange pattern. They all agreed on one thing: this wasn't noise. This was crafted. This was communication. When they began decoding the basic structure, the first translated fragment made everyone stop breathing for a moment. It said, "Please, help." The words were not exact. Translation was rough, but the meaning was unmistakable. It was a plea, sent across a distance so large that no one could imagine how far it had traveled. All through the night, more parts of the message began to make sense. It spoke of a collapsing star system, a threat approaching their world, and a need for sentience who can stand against terror. The analysts had to pause several times because their hands shook. This wasn't a movie. This wasn't fiction. Someone out there, someone not from Earth, was crying for help. The message went on to describe something, an invader or disaster, that their people couldn't stop. Details were unclear, lost in translation, but the tone was full of fear. Not just fear of danger, but fear of complete loss. A fear that everything they knew would end soon. By morning, the huge listening station was filled with people in suits, scientists with tired eyes, and military officers who arrived before breakfast. They tried to keep the situation quiet, but whispers spread. Something big had happened. People moved quickly across the rooms, carrying printouts and hard drives. Some looked excited, others pale. A few seemed almost frightened. Earth had wanted first contact to be peaceful, maybe even friendly. People imagined meetings with curious explorers, advanced beings who visited calmly. No one expected the first confirmed communication from another world to be a desperate cry for help. Different governments were informed, but each reacted in their own way. Some wanted to study the signal more before doing anything. Some wanted to respond immediately. Some wanted to keep everything secret, worried about the public's reaction. Fear mixed with curiosity. Hope mixed with dread. The arguments began quickly. While all this happened, the people at the listening station continued analyzing the message. They found coordinates. They found references to energy fields stronger than anything known on Earth. The message repeated words that translated to shadows, consuming, and falling light. None of it was clear enough to form a full picture, but everyone felt the heaviness behind those words. One group, however, reacted differently from the rest. While the world's governments argued, a separate, hidden organization watched the situation quietly. They had always known that humanity wasn't alone. They had expected something like this, though not in this way. For decades, they had trained a small group of individuals, people with remarkable abilities, extreme survival instincts, and unusual mental strength. They called them the Dreadworlders. Most humans had no idea such a group existed. They lived in remote places, trained in silence, and blended into normal life when needed. They weren't soldiers or superheroes. They were simply people born slightly different, more adaptable, more resilient, more capable of surviving conditions ordinary humans couldn't handle. Their ancestors had passed down traits that made them stand out, though they worked hard to hide it from the world. When the distress signal came in, the leaders of this hidden group gathered immediately. They listened to the recording together. Their reaction wasn't fear. It was recognition. This wasn't a message for all of humanity. It was a message for beings who could face things that ordinary minds might not even understand. And they believed this call was meant for them. They began preparing quietly. They didn't announce anything to the world. They didn't ask for permission. They knew Earth's leaders would keep debating for days, maybe weeks. And by then, it might be too late. So they activated something they had kept hidden for years, a protocol called Project Dreadworld, while global officials argued in conference rooms. The Dreadworlders arranged their own meeting in an underground chamber. It was simple, dimly lit, and quiet, far from the noise of politics. Maps were spread out on tables. Screens showed the decoded alien message. Everyone in the room felt the same pull, a sense of duty, a sense that they couldn't let the message go unanswered. But even among themselves, they spoke carefully. They knew this wasn't just another mission. This was the beginning of something far beyond their previous experiences. They discussed the risks, the unknowns, the possibility that none of them would return. Still, every person there was ready. Meanwhile, back at the listening station, the staff continued working nonstop. Some had been awake for nearly 20 hours. They tried to understand more about the sender. They found clues that the civilization was fragile, maybe not as physically strong as humans. The message contained repeated expressions of desperation. It also contained warnings about something they called the silent hunger, but no one could decode what that meant yet. The listening station's director sat alone for a moment, staring at the monitor. He wasn't thinking about science. He wasn't thinking about politics. He imagined someone far away, someone who didn't look human, someone living under a darkening sky, hoping that their message reached someone who cared. That thought stayed with him. Across the world, news outlets had no idea what was happening. People went to school, work, and markets like normal. Children laughed, people cooked, traffic moved. Life continued peacefully, unaware that the universe had just opened a door by afternoon. Earth's leaders finally agreed to send a small response message, carefully written, cautious, and full of diplomatic language. It didn't feel personal. It didn't feel warm. It felt like something written by committees. Not by people, but before that official message could even be transmitted, the Dreadworlders sent their own reply. Quietly, directly, without waiting for permission. Their message was simple. We heard you. We are coming. No one in the listening station knew about it. No government knew. Only the hidden group and the small team they selected to travel knew the truth. Humanity had answered, but not the humanity the world knew. The ones who answered were the ones who lived in shadows, trained in silence, and carried a responsibility no one else understood. And while the world continued living in peace, unaware of the danger someone else faced far away, A few individuals began preparing for a journey that would take them beyond anything Earth had ever imagined. They didn't know what they would find. They didn't know if the aliens were still alive. They didn't know what kind of terror waited in that distant corner of the universe. But they knew one thing with absolute clarity. Someone had cried for help, and they could not ignore it. As night fell again at the listening station, the strange signal continued pulsing softly, like a distant heartbeat. It was steady, patient, repeating the same desperate rhythm. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, the Dreadworlders prepared to step out of the shadows for the first time, not to reveal themselves to humanity, but to answer a call from a world that had reached out into the cold darkness of space, hoping anyone would listen. For many years, the world believed it understood its own people. Humans thought they knew everything about their species, its weaknesses, its abilities, its history. But far from the public eye, hidden in corners where curiosity rarely wandered, a different truth existed. Earth had a small group of people who lived quietly but were nothing like the rest of humanity. They looked ordinary, blended in easily, worked normal jobs when needed. But inside them was something unusual. Long ago, certain families had developed traits that allowed them to survive conditions most humans could not. These traits were not supernatural or magical. They were simply natural differences: stronger immune systems, sharper instincts, quicker reactions, an unusual tolerance for fear, and a strange mental clarity in moments when others panicked. These people didn't brag or try to stand out. They stayed hidden because the world was not ready to know that such differences existed. This hidden group eventually came to be known among themselves as the Dreadworlders, not because they were feared, but because they were trained to face things ordinary humans would dread. Their purpose was simple: protect humanity from threats that might one day come from the unknown. While the world lived normal lives, these individuals prepared for dangers no one else believed in. They trained in quiet forests, empty deserts, old underground bunkers, and remote islands where no one would disturb them. Their training wasn't about fighting or showing power. It was about understanding themselves deeply, learning to control fear, sharpening their awareness, and strengthening their bodies in natural, sustainable ways. They studied the sky, watched old signals, analyzed cosmic patterns, and kept track of strange events that most governments ignored. Most Dreadworlders lived double lives. During the day, they might be farmers, teachers, engineers, or drivers. At night or in hidden weekends, they joined training sessions that pushed them beyond normal limits. They did it without recognition or reward. They did it because they believed Earth would one day need them. When the distress signal from an unknown civilization reached Earth, the Dreadworlders reacted immediately. The message spoke of danger, fear, and a desperate call for help. To most governments, it sounded like a complicated problem requiring diplomacy and long discussions. But to the Dreadworlders, it felt like something they had been waiting for. It felt like a responsibility placed directly on their shoulders. Their leaders gathered in a quiet, underground chamber that had existed for more than 4 decades. The room looked simple: stone walls, wooden tables, old notebooks filled with records from generations of watchers. There were no flashy screens or futuristic technology. Their strength had never come from machines. Their strength came from discipline and preparation. The leaders listened to the alien message several times. Each repeated section made the room grow heavier. The message wasn't just a call for help. It sounded like a final attempt before giving up. The aliens spoke of a threat that drained their world's hope. They didn't sound strong or confident. They sounded tired, broken, and afraid. One of the older Dreadworlders stood up and said they could not ignore this. Earth was still far from united, still full of its own problems, still unsure about life beyond its skies. But someone out there was counting on them. If they didn't go, no one would. There was no time for global debates or long political meetings. The danger sounded urgent. After hours of discussion, the leaders agreed. They would choose a team not large, but strong, focused, and mentally prepared. These would be people who had shown courage without arrogance, calmness without coldness, and intelligence without ego. People who could survive deep space travel, unpredictable environments, and the fear of facing something truly unknown. They opened an old steel box stored in a corner of the chamber. Inside were small, worn badges made of metal, each carved with a symbol, a circle, with a line cutting through it. The circle represented worlds. The line represented the boundary between safety and danger. Those who wore these badges were trusted with missions that others could not handle. Word spread quietly through their hidden network. A small number of Dreadworlders were called back from their everyday lives. Some were in the mountains, guiding hikers. Some were working night shifts at ordinary offices. Some lived quiet lives raising families, but had always stayed ready. None of them hesitated when the call came. They packed lightly, said short goodbyes, and traveled to the meeting point without attracting attention. Meanwhile, the governments of the world were still struggling to decide what to do with the alien message. They held video meetings, argued over possibilities, worried about risks, and wondered how the public would react. A few officials suggested sending a small team to investigate. Others insisted they should not get involved in another world's problems. Some feared it might even be a trap. Nothing moved forward, but the Dreadworlders didn't have the luxury to wait. They had always known that by the time global politics agreed on something, it might already be too late. And the message from the aliens felt like time was already slipping away. Their base for operations was not a large headquarters. It was a hidden compound deep beneath a quiet village, known only to those who belonged to the group. When the selected members arrived, they were greeted with simple nods, not celebrations. The atmosphere was serious, but not dark. Everyone understood that their mission was not about fame or victory. It was about doing what needed to be done. In one of the rooms, the scientists among the Dreadworlders studied the alien signal more closely. They found hints of advanced technology, but also signs that the alien civilization was fragile. Their structures seemed delicate, their energy systems complicated, and their survival depended heavily on balance and harmony. They were not built for war. They were built for peaceful development. As they decoded more of the message, they realized something chilling. The aliens were facing an enemy that attacked through fear more than force. The message repeated references to a mental pressure, something that overwhelmed their minds and made it impossible for them to defend themselves. This was where the Dreadworlders' unusual abilities became important. Their natural resistance to panic, confusion, and emotional overload made them uniquely suited for such a challenge. The team selected for the mission gathered in a quiet hall. There were no speeches about glory or sacrifice. The leader simply said they would travel far beyond anything humans had experienced, and that their purpose was not to fight a war, but to help another civilization survive. The team members nodded, understanding the weight of what they were about to do. While preparations continued underground, the surface world remained unaware. People went shopping, laughed with friends, watched television, and slept peacefully. They had no idea that far beneath them, a group of humans was preparing to step into a different part of the universe. The Dreadworlders prepared their vessel, a sleek, compact craft that had been constructed secretly over many years. It was built for travel through dangerous regions of space, using technology inspired by old scientific theories and pieces of strange materials found in remote locations decades earlier. The vessel wasn't huge or flashy, but it was strong, silent, and designed to keep its passengers safe from unknown threats. As the launch day approached, the team went through final training sessions. They practiced breathing exercises to stay calm in unfamiliar environments. They studied alien symbols, hoping to recognize them if they encountered similar ones. They reviewed emergency plans, though they knew most of what they would face could not be predicted. They talked quietly among themselves, sharing stories from their lives, grounding each other in human emotions before stepping into the unknown. One night before departure, they gathered outside the base in a quiet field. The sky was clear, the stars bright. Standing there, they felt the weight of the mission differently. The sky no longer looked like a peaceful blanket of lights. It looked like a vast ocean full of secrets and distant cries. Somewhere among those stars, someone was waiting for them. Someone whose entire world depended on whether they could reach them in time. The next morning, the vessel powered up. Its engines made a low humming sound, nothing like the roaring rockets in movies. The Dreadworlders boarded calmly, their movements steady and focused. They fastened themselves in, checked their systems, and looked at each other, no fear, just readiness. Far above them, satellites watched the planet. But none of them noticed the quiet craft lifting from a hidden exit and disappearing into the dark sky. No alarms sounded. No news reports noticed anything. The mission began in silence. Back on Earth, the alien distress signal continued playing at the listening station, pulsing like a heartbeat that refused to stop. But the answer had already been sent. Not by officials, not by global leaders, but by the people who had prepared all their lives for a moment like this. The Dreadworlders moved into space, carrying with them Earth's quiet promise, one that the rest of humanity did not even know it had made. The moment the vessel left Earth's atmosphere, everything changed for the Dreadworlders. From the outside, the craft looked calm, gliding into the darkness with almost no sound. Inside, however, the team felt a strange mix of emotions: excitement, nervousness, curiosity, and a quiet sense of responsibility. None of them had ever traveled this far from their home, yet all of them acted as if they had done it 100 times before. That was part of their training. Stay steady even when the world around you becomes unfamiliar. The vessel's interior was simple. Soft lights glowed above their heads, and the seats were built to keep their bodies relaxed during long travel. There were screens showing star maps, energy readings, and translated pieces of the alien message. Every so often, a soft beep reminded them that the coordinates were locked and the course was stable. For the first few hours, the journey felt almost peaceful. Earth slowly faded behind them, becoming a tiny blue dot. Some of the team took a moment to look back. Seeing their home from such a distance made everything feel surreal. The oceans, the mountains, the lights of cities, all of it was shrinking into the background. One of them quietly whispered that it felt strange to leave a planet that had never truly understood them. The others nodded softly. As they entered deeper space, the ship activated its long-range travel mode. The stars around them stretched into thin lines as the vessel accelerated. The cabin vibrated gently, like a distant hum in the bones. Even the most experienced among them had to close their eyes for a moment to adjust. The feeling wasn't painful. It just felt like being pushed gently into a world without gravity or direction. Hours passed, though time felt strange inside the vessel. There was no sunrise or sunset to mark the passing minutes. Only the steady rhythm of the machines reminded them that they were still moving. Some of the team checked their instruments every few minutes, making sure everything was working correctly. Others sat quietly, reflecting on what awaited them. Around the middle of the journey, the space outside began to change. Instead of calm blackness sprinkled with stars, they passed through regions where light behaved strangely. Colors twisted in swirling patterns, blue, red, violet, shifting like slow-moving waves. These weren't normal cosmic clouds. They were distorted energy fields. The team knew from their training that these places were rare and unpredictable. No human-designed spacecraft, except theirs, could travel safely through such zones. Inside the vessel, screens flickered slightly. The lights dimmed and brightened again, almost like breathing. The air felt a bit heavier, though it was still safe. The team members tightened their seat straps and exchanged focused looks. This part of the journey required full attention. One of the scientists on board adjusted the ship's stabilizers. The vessel tilted slightly, correcting its course as it passed through a region of warped gravity. Outside, fragments of light flashed like quick reflections in water. The crew didn't panic. They had trained for moments exactly like this. They slowed their breathing, let their minds stay clear, and trusted the vessel's design. After several tense minutes, the disturbance passed. The lights inside returned to normal. Everyone exhaled at the same time, though no one laughed or joked. They knew this was just the beginning. There were far more unknowns ahead. As they approached the coordinates in the alien message, the vessel detected faint signals, some weak, some chaotic, some almost like cries echoing through radio waves. These weren't the original distress signals from earlier. These sounded newer, more scattered, and less organized. It suggested that something was happening at the destination right now, maybe even this very moment. The closer they got, the more the readings changed. Gravitational fields shifted unpredictably. Static danced across the screens. Even the navigation system struggled for a few seconds before correcting itself. The team members tightened their hold on the armrests, feeling the vessel tremble under the pressure of unseen forces. They began noticing something else. Two soft whispers in the static of the communication system. The whispers weren't real voices, but the scrambled remains of signals trying to form words. Every few minutes, the sound returned, like an unfinished sentence. Some of the fragments sounded emotional, almost like fear hidden behind layers of distortion. No one in the team spoke during these moments. They simply listened, letting the reality of the situation sink in. Somewhere ahead, people real, living beings were struggling. And those beings were waiting for someone who might never arrive. As they traveled deeper into the star system, they saw the first sign of something unnatural. A dim, flickering light wrapped around a region of space like a fading curtain. It wasn't a natural star or planet glow. It was something artificial, maybe a shield or barrier. The vessel scanned it, revealing unstable energy lines and signs of heavy deterioration. The pilot guided the ship carefully through an opening in the energy field. As soon as they passed through, space changed dramatically. The colors faded into darker tones. The stars seemed more distant. A heavy stillness settled around them, like stepping into a room where something terrible had happened long ago. Ahead, they saw a planet that once might have been beautiful. It had wide oceans, green land masses, and glowing cities. But now, many of its lights were flickering or completely dark. The atmosphere had strange patches of swirling clouds, as if storms were forming without natural weather patterns. It looked like a world caught between life and collapse. The vessel descended slowly, staying cautious. They flew past a broken satellite, drifting aimlessly. It had strange markings on it, nothing like human scripts, yet cracked and damaged. Beneath them, parts of the surface glowed faintly, as if fires had burned long before and left behind deep scars. The team didn't rush. They scanned the surface carefully, searching for signs of survivors. Finally, they detected movement clustered in one area near what looked like a large city. The structures there were delicate and tall, shaped almost like glass towers, though many were bent or dim. It was clear that this city had once been a place of art, knowledge, and peace, but now it felt wounded. As they prepared to land, the vessel received a weak, trembling signal. It wasn't a message with words, just a repeating emotional wave, fear mixed with hope. Like someone trying to say, "Please, don't leave us." The team exchanged serious looks. They had understood intellectually that another civilization needed help, But hearing that emotional signal made it personal. It felt like someone calling directly to them, trusting them completely, despite not knowing who or what they were. The vessel landed softly on a large platform covered in dust and fragments. The air around them shimmered with strange particles, but it was safe enough to breathe with protective masks. When the doors opened, a quiet wind brushed through the cabin. It carried a faint sound like distant humming. Not mechanical, but almost like voices singing softly from far away. The team stepped out slowly. Their boots touched the surface of a world that had never seen humans before. The ground felt firm but hollow, as if something deep below was vibrating faintly. The sky was darker than Earth's, with streaks of violet clouds drifting slowly in the distance. They saw movement small figures watching them cautiously. The figures didn't approach immediately. They seemed unsure, maybe even afraid. But when they saw the Dreadworlders standing calmly, without weapons drawn or any sign of hostility, they took small steps forward. Their silhouettes looked fragile, their bodies slender and pale, almost glowing faintly in the dim light. The team didn't rush. They kept their posture open, gentle, showing they came with no harm. After a long silence, one of the alien figures stepped closer. Its eyes were large and full of exhaustion, but also curiosity. It tilted its head as if trying to understand these new visitors. Then, slowly, it lifted one hand and pointed toward the city behind it, as if saying, "Follow." The team understood. They walked together toward the damaged city, feeling the weight of the moment. They were the first humans to stand on an alien world, and they were not here for exploration or glory. They were here because someone had cried for help. And now, finally, help had arrived. Deep inside, every member of the team knew this was only the beginning. What they would learn in the next hours could change everything they believed about the universe, about life, and about the responsibility that came with answering a call from across the stars. The message from the patrol ship changed everything. Before that moment, the council chamber had been filled mostly with doubt, hesitation, and uneasy whispers. But once they heard that strange, trembling voice from the small vessel near the star's border, the entire room fell quiet. No one had expected a voice like that. It sounded weak, scared, and almost wounded. And yet it was still trying to communicate, still trying to warn them. That alone confused many of the delegates. For a few minutes after the audio ended, no one spoke. Everyone kept looking at one another, waiting for someone else to say something first. The silence was heavy, as if the air itself had turned into something solid. Even the lights in the chamber felt dimmer. At the far end of the hall, the chief coordinator slowly stood up. His hands were slightly shaking, not because he was afraid, but because he knew what the next decision could mean for their future. He had seen too many troubled times in his long career, but nothing like this. The message was not just a warning. It was a cry for help, one that didn't match anything they understood. He cleared his throat and finally spoke. "We need to confirm. Who sent this message? What species used this frequency?" A few technicians began searching through their systems. Their screens flickered with thousands of data lines. It took a while before one of them finally stepped forward and said, "The source. It's not familiar, not listed, not registered. We have no record of any species built like this." That made the room shift again. Unknown, unregistered. That meant the sender wasn't from any allied world, nor from any enemy nation they recognized. It meant someone entirely new was asking for help, trying to lure them into something. But then someone at the center table leaned forward and said what many were already thinking. If they're unknown, then how did they enter our territory without detection? They came all the way to the border star. That means they traveled far. We need to understand their purpose. Another delegate whispered, "What if they're running from something? What if whatever forced them out is coming this way too? The words froze the air again. The idea of an unseen threat entering their side of space was frightening for everyone. No one wanted another crisis, especially after the last century of rebuilding efforts. Their worlds were peaceful again, fragile. Yes, but peaceful. No one wanted that delicate balance to break. Before the conversation could fall into panic, the lead analyst quietly stepped forward and said, "We examined the voice patterns. Whoever spoke is in distress, but they weren't lying. Their tone indicates real fear and urgency." Fear of what? Someone asked. The analyst shook their head. "We don't know yet." The council needed answers. They needed clarity. They needed to see the being behind that trembling voice. So they called for the patrol crew to bring the small vessel to the inner dock. The ship arrived under heavy escort. Everyone expected something dangerous inside, some strange creature, or some advanced alien weapon. But when the hatch finally opened, the entire crowd forgot how to breathe. A small figure stepped out, barely taller than a child. Its skin was pale like moonlight, and its posture looked fragile, as if strong wind could push it over. It held its arms close to its body, and its large eyes looked both terrified and exhausted. It wasn't wearing armor or carrying any weapon. Instead, it looked like it hadn't slept in days. A faint glow came from its suit, but even that flicker was dying. Some guards raised their tools defensively, but the little being shrunk back immediately, shaking and clutching its chest. It didn't try to fight. It didn't try to resist. Its fear was real. One of the officers slowly stepped forward, keeping his voice calm as he said, "You're safe. No one will harm you. Tell us who you are." The creature opened its mouth, but no words came out. Instead, it gave a soft sound like a breath mixed with pain. Then it slowly reached into a small pocket on its suit. For a moment, the guard stiffened, expecting danger. But all the creature pulled out was a tiny crystal sheet. The officer carefully took the crystal and looked at the patterns glowing inside it. "This is a data sheet," he said. "It's a message." When they activated the sheet, a projection filled the air. It showed a dark void, filled with something none of them had ever seen. Shapes moved in that darkness, shapes that didn't look like ships, animals, or machines. They looked like shadows with jagged edges. They spread like ink in water, swallowing everything they touched. The council watched in stunned silence as the shadows consumed entire stations and planets. The recordings were blurry, chaotic, and fast, but the meaning was clear. Something was coming. Something that didn't look alive, but acted like it had a hunger for entire worlds. The small alien trembled harder as the images played. When the projection finally faded, it pointed at itself, and then at the council members, as if saying, "Please, help us. Help me." The coordinator asked softly, "Are you the last of your people?" The little being lowered its head. The faint glow in its suit flickered again, almost like a dying flame. It didn't need to speak. Everyone understood the answer. The patrol captain, who had been standing quietly this whole time, finally stepped forward. He had seen many things during his patrol years, but this was different. He looked at the council and said, "If these shadows are moving towards our region, then this is not just an alien problem. It will soon be our problem too. We need to prepare." Some delegates agreed. Some hesitated. Others looked at the small creature again and felt their hearts soften. Compassion can be a powerful thing, even in a room full of cold decisions and political weight. The coordinator then asked the little being, "What do you call these entities? Do they have a name?" The alien trembled and slowly lifted its hand to draw a shape in the air. It twisted its fingers in different directions, making patterns none of them recognized. The translator struggled and finally produced a word. Dread. Not dread as in fear, but dread as in a title. A name. A warning. The room went still. The shadows were called dread. A quiet debate started, not of anger, but of fear wrapped in reason. Some argued that helping the alien could bring danger. Some argued that doing nothing would be worse. Some argued that their worlds were not ready for another fight. The patrol captain spoke again. Whatever those dread things are, they are spreading. If they destroyed this being's entire world, then we're dealing with a force stronger than anything recorded. We can't pretend it'll go away. The coordinator looked at him thoughtfully. Then we must send a team. Yes, a team. Not an army. Not a fleet. They needed people who could understand, explore, and return with answers. People who were brave but level-headed. People who could help them prepare for whatever was coming next. The council slowly agreed. They would assemble a small, skilled group to follow the path the alien came from. To study the traces left behind. To understand the enemy before it reached their borders. The small alien watched as the decision was made. Its expression softened not quite a smile, but a small sign of relief. It gently touched one of the captain's sleeves, as if silently thanking him for speaking up. The captain didn't move away. Instead, he looked down and nodded slowly. Later, as preparations began, one thing became clear. Their region of space was not as quiet as they believed. Something had been moving in the far darkness for a long time. Something they ignored simply because they never saw it. And now it was too close. The alien was given a quiet room to rest. Medics tried to help stabilize its fading energy. They whispered among themselves about how light its body felt, how fragile its breathing sounded. Some even wondered how such beings survived long enough to travel space at all. But despite its delicate form, it had crossed unimaginable distances. That alone showed a kind of strength none of them understood yet. Meanwhile, the council finalized the list of those who would join the exploration team. They didn't know how long the mission would last or how dangerous it would be. But it had to be done, because something powerful had destroyed a world, something called the Dread Dot, and if the aliens' trembling warnings were even half true, then the team would be the first line of understanding, and possibly the first line of defense. The shadows in that recording were not just shapes moving through the void. They were coming. And the real question was simple. Would the council's decisions be fast enough? The future of their worlds depended on it. The team chosen for the mission gathered near the central dock long before the sun cycle began. Some of them stood silently, checking their equipment with steady hands. Others paced back and forth, trying to settle their nerves. Everyone knew this mission wasn't a routine journey. The council had never sent anyone toward unknown danger with so little information. But they all understood the need. The small alien resting in the medical bay had come from something terrifying, something that wiped out its world. If the same threat was approaching their region, then time was already running short. The patrol captain, who had been the first to speak up in the council chamber, arrived last. Not because he was late, but because he had spent extra time reviewing every detail of the mission. He wanted to make sure nothing was overlooked. When he finally stepped onto the dock, the team straightened instinctively. His presence always brought a sense of calm, not because he was strict, but because he was steady. He treated everyone with respect, and in return, they trusted his judgment. Before boarding the ship, the captain took a moment to look at each member of the team. There was someone skilled in scanning distant signals, someone experienced in tracking energy traces, someone who specialized in reading environmental changes, and a technician who knew how to repair nearly anything with just a handful of tools. Each person was chosen carefully and for a reason. They didn't know what they would face, but they had the best possible people for the job. The ship they would use was small, fast, and built for long-distance travel. It wasn't meant for fighting, only observing and gathering information. Its sleek frame glowed faintly as the engines powered up. The air around the dock vibrated with a soft hum. For a moment, the captain simply watched the ship's lights shimmer. It reminded him of how peaceful everything still looked. Peace often hides danger quietly. Before they left, the small alien from the medical bay insisted on seeing them. The medics carefully brought it out, guiding its weak steps. The little being held a new crystal sheet, glowing brighter than the first one. It handed it to the captain with trembling fingers. The captain accepted it gently. The medic explained its energy levels had stabilized a little, enough for it to communicate. The captain crouched slightly, so the alien didn't have to strain its neck to look up. "Is this another message?" he asked softly. The alien touched the crystal, and a faint image appeared, just a single star system, burned black. Not one building remained. Not one sign of life. The alien pressed a hand to its chest, then touched the projection, and then pointed toward the dark area beyond their maps. The meaning was clear. That system was the last safe place before the dread overtook everything. The team swallowed nervously. It was one thing to hear a warning. It was another to see the result with their own eyes. When the ship finally took off, the council, medics, guards, and the little alien watched it rise. The engines glowed brighter, lifting the sleek vessel into the air. It passed through the dock's shield barrier and entered open space. The captain didn't say anything for the first few minutes. He watched the stars around them, the quiet emptiness stretching in all directions. Once they moved beyond the routine patrol routes, the atmosphere inside the ship changed. The crew no longer felt like they were leaving home. They felt like they were entering something unknown. One of the team members sat by the main screen, adjusting sensors every few minutes. Another monitored the long-range energy reader, tapping the display each time it flickered. Hours passed. The stars kept shifting slowly across the windows. Everything looked normal, calm, and beautiful. But none of them were fooled. If the alien's warning was true, this same calmness existed just before its world was destroyed. That thought stayed quietly in the back of everyone's mind. Then the first strange reading appeared. The sensor specialist leaned forward and squinted at the numbers. "Captain," he said, "something's odd here." The captain walked over. "What kind of odd?" The specialist pointed at the screen. "The energy levels are too low. Not normal low. More like drained." The technician joined them. "Drained how? Like a star collapse?" "No," the specialist said. "More like everything is losing energy at the same time. Space, dust, particles. Everything." The captain frowned. He knew the difference. A collapsing star leaves violent signatures. But this looked clean. Too clean. Like something erased the natural energy instead of breaking it. As they traveled deeper into that region, the ship grew slightly dim. Not because it was malfunctioning, but because the natural light around them faded. The stars were still there, shining, but the space between them looked thicker and darker than usual. Almost like a faint fog, except fog doesn't exist in space. Someone whispered, "Is this the Dread's trace?" No one answered. After several more hours, they finally reached the system shown in the crystal projection. At first, it looked normal, just a small star with a few planets orbiting around it. But when they approached one of the planets, everything changed. The surface was completely smooth. Not burned, not destroyed by explosions. Just smooth. Like all textures had been wiped away. Buildings, forests, oceans, mountains, nothing remained. The planet looked like a blank sphere. The technician's voice shook slightly as he said, "How is this even possible? Destruction leaves debris. This is like something removed everything." The captain felt a tightness in his chest. If the Dread could erase a planet so completely, Then they were facing something beyond any known threat. They needed to scan the planet. They needed samples. They needed anything that could help understand what happened. The ship slowly descended into the upper atmosphere. There was no turbulence, no weather, no movement at all. The world felt dead, not just without life, but without memory. When they landed, the team put on suits and stepped outside. Their footsteps left no prints. The ground was too unnatural for that. It felt smooth like glass, but looked like stone. They split up into small groups to examine the area. The environmental specialist checked the air and said, "There's nothing here. Not even dust. Not a single microbe." One of the others ran a scanner along the ground. Still no signs of impact. This wasn't an explosion. Something covered the planet in a uniform layer. The captain touched the ground with his gloved hand. It was cold, but in a strange way, not like cold temperature, but like an absence of warmth got after walking for a long distance. The technician called out, "Captain!" "You need to see this." The captain hurried over. The technician was kneeling near a faint indentation, a line barely visible, curving slightly. "What is it?" the captain asked. "I think." This was a wall, the technician said quietly. They realized then that the surface wasn't smooth naturally. It had covered everything beneath it, which meant the original environment, buildings, and history were buried under this uniform layer. But buried how deeply? And by what? Before they could examine further, the scanners activated themselves, screaming with sudden detection alerts. The readings spiked so fast that the screens turned red. The sensor specialist yelled, "Captain, something's moving under the surface." The ground trembled slightly, a slow vibration traveling through their boots. Not enough to knock them over, but enough to freeze everyone in place. The captain ordered the team to fall back toward the ship immediately. They moved fast, hearts racing, breaths sharp inside their helmets. The tremors grew stronger for a few seconds, then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was almost scarier. Inside the ship, the door sealed behind them. The captain didn't waste a second. "Take off, now." The engines ignited, lifting them off the dead planet. The vibration below the ground faded as they rose higher. Once they reached orbit, everyone looked down at the blank world, trying to understand what had tried to rise from beneath. But nothing moved now. The planet looked peaceful again, an empty dot. The specialist finally spoke. "Captain, I don't think that was the planet shaking. I think it was something inside." That thought stayed with them as they left the system. The deeper they traveled beyond that point, the darker space became. The fog-like darkness grew thicker. The sensors flickered more often. The teen spoke less. Fear wasn't spoken out loud, but it was there in every quiet look they exchanged. Then, for the first time, they saw it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough got far in the distance. Where the darkness was deepest, something shifted. It wasn't shaped like a ship. It wasn't shaped like any creature they knew. It didn't have an outline. They could only see it because it blocked the already dim starlight. A piece of space seemed to move, drifting slowly, almost lazily. But its movement felt wrong. It felt heavy, like it was pulling in the space around it. The captain whispered, "Everyone stay calm." But no one was calm. The shape turned, or maybe it didn't. It was impossible to tell. The sensors picked up no clear reading, no temperature, no mass. Just an absence. Then the darkness stretched slightly, as if it was reaching toward them. The specialist gasped, "Captain, it's aware of us." The captain didn't hesitate. "Turn the ship around. Maximum speed. We leave now." The engines roared, and the ship spun sharply, racing back toward safer regions. For several long minutes, no one breathed. They didn't know if the dark shape was following. They didn't know if it could follow. But slowly, the darkness behind them faded. The fog thinned. The stars brightened again. Only then did the team finally exhale, their bodies shaking with relief and leftover fear. They had seen the dread, not clearly, but enough to know it was real, not enough to know it was coming. The captain looked out the window at the distant stars. The mission was no longer about gathering data. It was now a warning, and they had to return home fast, before the dread reached them first. The journey back home felt longer than the entire mission combined, even though the engines were pushing the ship faster than their usual limits. The crew sat quietly in their seats, still shaken from what they had seen. No one needed to say anything. They all understood that the shadow they encountered was not something their worlds were prepared to face. Just knowing it was out there, drifting freely like darkness with intention, filled the ship with a heavy silence. The captain sat at the front, looking at the main screen without blinking. He had seen strange things in space during his career, but nothing had ever bothered him the way that shifting darkness had. It wasn't the size of it, or even its form. He still wasn't sure it had a form. It was the feeling he got when it moved, a feeling that it wasn't moving through space. It was moving space itself, like the universe bent quietly around it. He didn't know how to explain that to the council. He wasn't even sure he could explain it to himself. A soft beep broke the silence. The technician looked up. "Captain, the long-range tracker shows the dark region stopped expanding once we left. It's stabilizing again." The captain nodded, but his face didn't relax. Stabilizing meant it wasn't chasing them. But that also meant it didn't need to chase anyone. It moved at its own pace, on its own terms. It didn't rush. The dread didn't need to rush. After several hours, the stars appeared brighter, clearer, almost welcoming. The thick dark fog that had followed them earlier no longer touched the space around their ship. They finally crossed the border back into their region, the place where navigation signals worked properly, where voices didn't echo strangely inside the ship, and where their hearts didn't race for no reason. Everyone exhaled at once. It felt like stepping out of cold water. The communication officer turned on the transmitter. "Home base, this is the exploration team. We're returning with urgent findings. Prepare immediate council briefing." A moment later, a voice answered, "Acknowledged. Docking bay is ready. Medical team standing by if needed." The crew shared tired smiles, not because they were injured, but because hearing a familiar voice brought them comfort. They were finally close to home. When the ship entered the dock, lights guided it into place. The engines slowly powered down, and for the first time since the dread encounter, the ship became quiet in a peaceful way. Not an eerie silence, just normal silence. The kind that felt safe. As the airlock opened, the patrol captain stepped out first. A group of council members waited nearby, along with medics and guards. Their expressions changed the moment they saw the crew's faces. Even without saying a word, the team's tired, shaken eyes told them that the threat was real. The council led the team straight to the main chamber. The little alien they had rescued earlier was there too, sitting quietly on a cushioned chair. Its glow was still faint, but its eyes followed the team anxiously. When the captain entered, the alien slowly stood up and reached out as if to ask, "Did you see it?" The captain gave a slow nod. The alien lowered its gaze. It already knew the answer, but hearing the silent confirmation made its shoulders sink. It had hoped the dread hadn't moved far beyond its own world. It had hoped it wouldn't spread. But now it understood that the darkness had no boundary. Everyone gathered around the large table. The captain placed the crystal sheets and all the recorded data on the surface. The screens in the room activated, filling the air with images of the blank planet, the drained energy readings, and the strange shaking from beneath the surface. But the moment the recording of the dark shape appeared, Even though it was faint and unclear, the room felt colder. Some council members leaned forward, squinting at the shadow. Others slowly stepped back as if their instincts told them to stay away from the image. Even though it was only a projection dot, the captain calmly explained everything. He described the fading starlight, the drained energy readings, the planet covered in a strange smooth layer, the trembling ground, and finally, the moment the darkness shifted. He didn't exaggerate anything. He didn't need to. The truth alone was terrifying enough. When he finished, the room stayed silent for a long time. The delegates glanced at each other, unsure of what their next move should be. One of them finally spoke, trying to keep their voice steady. If this dread continues spreading, how long until it reaches our borders? The captain looked at the specialist, who swallowed before answering. At its current speed, it's slow, very slow, but it doesn't stop. Eventually, it will reach us. Years? Someone asked. No. Decades, the specialist said. Maybe more. But that doesn't change anything. It is moving, and it won't turn back. A council member tried to take comfort in the long timeline. We have time then. We can prepare. But the captain shook his head. Time doesn't help unless we understand what we're dealing with. And right now, we don't. The dread wasn't chasing us. It wasn't attacking. It didn't even react violently. It simply existed, and that alone was enough to destroy an entire world. The little alien made a soft, trembling sound, drawing everyone's attention. It slowly walked to the front and pointed at the projection of its erased home. Then it pointed at itself and shook its head. The meaning was clear. You can't fight the dread the way you fight normal enemies. The technician stepped forward. The planet we visited wasn't shattered. It wasn't burned. It wasn't poisoned. It was covered. Something laid that uniform layer over everything. That means the dread doesn't destroy, it replaces. The room stirred uneasily. Replacing was worse than destroying. It meant the dread wasn't just spreading. It was rewriting space. The council asked the captain, "Do you believe anything can stop it?" The captain took a moment before answering. "I don't know. But I do know that ignoring it would be the biggest mistake we could ever make." Some wanted to argue. Some wanted to panic. Some wanted to deny everything. But then the small alien walked toward the captain and gently touched his arm. Its faint glow brightened, just for a moment. It seemed to draw strength from the captain's presence. Then it turned toward the council and held out its tiny hands. Everyone watched as the alien slowly projected a new image, one it had kept hidden until now. It showed a small group of beings from its world, standing together. They weren't soldiers or leaders. They looked like regular people visiting a research site, wearing simple suits. Behind them was a massive structure, perhaps a lab or a defense project. The alien pointed to those figures, and then placed its hand over its own heart. One council member whispered, "You're saying there were people studying the dread?" The alien nodded. Slowly. Another asked, "Did they find anything that worked?" The alien hesitated for the first time. Its glow flickered weakly, and the room grew quiet. Finally, it shook its head slowly, sadly. "No," the captain said softly. "They didn't find a way." The alien lowered the projection, its shoulders sinking again. But then it looked up, eyes determined even though its body was fragile. It tapped the table, then pointed at the team, then pointed at the council. Its silent message was clear. Even if the dread can't be stopped yet, they must try. Its world made mistakes. This one still had a chance. The captain understood the weight behind that gesture. He stepped forward and faced the council. "We can't fight the dread right now, but we can study it. We can track it. We can prepare. And we can make sure its spread is slowed as much as possible." The council didn't respond immediately, but their expressions softened. The fear in the room was still strong, but now it sat beside something else, responsibility. After a long discussion, they decided to form a special division dedicated entirely to studying the Dread's movement and understanding its behavior. They would send more missions, collect more data, and learn everything they could before the darkness reached their borders. The little alien was given a permanent place within the program, not as a subject, but as a survivor, someone whose experience could help them avoid the same fate. The exploration team was honored for their bravery, though none of them cared about recognition. They only cared about what they had witnessed and what it meant for the future. As the meeting ended, the captain stepped outside and looked up at the sky. The stars above looked the same as always, bright, quiet, peaceful. And yet, he now understood that somewhere far beyond those stars, a slow, patient darkness was moving. Not fast, not loud, not angry. Just moving, quietly replacing everything in its path. He knew that their worlds were safe for now. But someday, the Dread would arrive. And when that day came, the choices they made starting now would determine whether they survived or became another erased world in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. The captain took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "We'll be ready this time." The little alien stood beside him, its faint glow reflecting gently off the window. For the first time, it didn't look afraid. It looked hopeful. And sometimes, hope is the first weapon against the dark.